For one, I think the topic of age is very important to consider with Spike. He is constantly referred to as a baby dragon, but honestly, when we look at all the skills Spike has and maturity he displays in contrast to his friends, I think Spike is actually a lot older than people think. I mean, for one, he was hatched when Twilight was a filly, so just how big is the age gap between them exactly? That being said, however, it also cannot be denied that he also does evoke certain juvenile traits that do clash with his level of maturity, but not in the way that I find contrived, more in the way that interestingly reflects his upbringing in pony society. When we look at things, we see that Spike is very much accomplished in doing numerous chores, cooking, cleaning, organising, and even in some cases, fighting off danger for his friends. Yet at the same time, he is limited by having a constant need for sleep despite his heavy work schedule. His level of skills reflect his mature capabilities, as if he actually is in the employment of Twilight, but on the other hand, one could also perceive Spike's duties as a means of his friends and family giving him something productive to do, so that his inner mischievous nature doesn't take over him, something which becomes even more apparent in Secret of My Excess. What's especially interesting about that episode is that Spike's friends come to the horrifying realization of just what Spike is potentially capable of, and from then on they actively encourage and persuade him that being helpful, gentle, and not like other dragons is better for him. Isn't it intriguing to wonder that they might actually be doing that for their own security, to ensure that Spike won't stray into greedy territory again and freshen their lives? Well, maybe not completely, because I think it is apparent they all do appreciate him for the way he is, but I think their complete disregard for how them saying Spike resembles nothing of his kind is actually a bit insensitive. As I've stated, Spike has a strong sense of purpose, and it's the main six stating that he is unlike the rest of his species that gives him the compulsion to venture on a journey of self-discovery, almost as if he's actually beginning to doubt his upbringings in pony society, so much to the point where it would be virtually impossible for him to interact with any dragons in the future. Thankfully though, he does learn that the way you are born should give you no obligations to choose who you want to be, and thus Spike does remain comfortable with the life he has chosen. Unlike the rest of the main characters, Spike doesn't really have many personal obligations or passions for a career outside of living and helping his family. He clearly possesses the skills necessary in order to make his own living with his own career, but being helpful to others is all he knows, and furthermore, as he discovers, all he cares about. As he states himself, he really does treat his friends as his family, because outside of them he has no other. But isn't it interesting to consider that despite being a dragon, he has received virtually no prejudices against him by living in Ponyville, even though ponies are generally afraid of dragons, and yet even when Spike grows into a fully grown dragon and nearly destroys Ponyville, he still remains accepted by his community regardless. Let's be honest, Spike has a pretty comfortable lifestyle. He lives in a society that accepts him and takes care of him, and he is perfectly comfortable in dedicating his time to helping them. We see just how distraught he is when he feels unneeded, and even when given his own personal free time, he initially actually struggles to find things to do on his own. We can also see that Spike has a very selective sense of maturity. For one, he is able to view things logically and reasonably where others would be lost, but then he also lacks the maturity to see when his actions may be wrong and selfishly fueled. It's also interesting to watch that just how Spike accepts himself in life as being more like a pony than a dragon. He also gradually embraces his more effeminate traits over the course of the series. In early episodes, he tries to embrace his own gender by dismissing things considered to be feminine, yet these outward disdains are clearly just false defences of his own masculinity, for he is in fact overjoyed to receive a ticket to the Galloping Gala, just as he is comfortable with cooking and wearing aprons. However, his attempts to defend his masculinity, while clearly opposite of his real nature, are nonetheless great excuses to display comedy, ranging from his attempts to flex his arms and give himself a self-image as a muscular knight, ironically displaying his obliviousness to the fact that his friends embrace him for not being stereotypically masculine. Through Spike, the show is able to break gender stereotypes and teach both the characters and the viewers that that's perfectly fine. And that leads me into my next point of interest about Spike, his obliviousness. Now, just by himself, Spike does possess certain skills that other characters don't, due to him, well, being a dragon. For one, he actually has posable thumbs and doesn't have to hold things in his mouth, as well as having fire breath and a long dexterous tongue. But as I previously discussed, it's amazing to consider the potential benefits and dangers Spike has as a fully grown dragon. Heck, not even that, as Equestria Games showed, even at the size he is at now, he seems capable of burning giant ice clouds and the like, which in perspective actually makes Spike a very competent and potentially dangerous force. But the thing that's most interesting about it is the fact that Spike is in fact completely oblivious to his own strengths, but for a good reason. When we think about it, there are actually quite a lot of instances in the past where things like Spike's fire breath would actually have been especially useful to solve situations, yet he is either too scared or unaware of his fullest capabilities. I mean, just look at this section in Inspiration Manifestation. Look at how devilishly and confidently he burns and melts away the lock of a secret door, then just innocently and nonchalantly walks in. I think it's due to his potential and unique skills that make Spike a great character to use for teaching certain lessons, especially ones about accepting yourself and believing in your skills even when you believe that they don't contribute much or make up for past failures. What's even more great about Spike is that he has these skills that no one else has, yet for the majority of the time his helpfulness derives just straight from his personality and his ability to help and advise. And of course, one of the very main reasons why I love Spike so much is his innocence. He's just so likeable, because at its core, he's a sweetheart. I think the reason why MLP is such a beloved and accessible show is because of its innocence, because of the fact that its lessons and humour can reach to anyone, and the wonderfully charming and innocent universe it creates is just a wonderful, sweet haven for viewers to visit. They may go as a means to escape reality, but then they return to reality with greater knowledge of how the world of emotions work. Yes, Spike does display a somewhat mature sense of humour given his sarcastic running commentary, and the fact that as Hurricane Fluttershy showed, he actually has a deeper intelligence than some ponies do when he's able to translate Twilight's technobabble. On the surface, Spike's sarcasm makes him funny and fun to watch, but underneath the skin, he's really truly innocent at heart. He could be shown to be incredibly sensitive, often jumping to extremes and thinking up worst-case scenarios where one of his friends might be in danger. He grows insanely insecure and jealous about his self-proclaimed existence being threatened. And even though he can detect that Twilight is becoming nervous about her letter to Celestia, he still shows great concern for her, and of course, we know that his greatest fear is being sent away from Twilight forever. His obliviousness also plays a factor here, when he often takes a while to get the joke when it's pointed at him, or just how he finds a delightful joy in what's going on around him, while ignoring everything else. He's very clearly kind-hearted and will do anything for his friends, going above and beyond to satisfy and please them, and even when he does make jokes at others' misfortune, he is usually well-meaning in doing it. As well as representing sacrifice, Spike also evokes many traits from the elements of harmony, being honest, kind, generous, comical, and loyal. Hell, jokes made about Spike being Don the new Rainbow Dash in Return to Harmony as the more appropriate candidate are made for a reason. There are also times when Spike can be easily brought to tears and does depend on the protection and advice from his friends. It's here I must point out though that Spike's innocence and sensitivity once again derives from the fact that he has spent his entire life in service of someone else, and treats his friends as a literal family. His way of exaggerating things is very different to Twilight. Twilight exaggerates when her own interests and potential future is at stake, worrying about the outcomes that affect her future Celestia student. Because Spike has never really been in that position, it enables him to take a more reasonable stance in those situations. Just like when the tables are turned, and it's Spike's purposes in life being threatened, or the safety of his family, does he start to break down, and it's actually Twilight that has to talk him out of it. He's both old and young, mature and immature, level-headed and juvenile, but I think his unique experiences allow these contrasts about him to make sense, moulding him into what I perceive to be an incredibly complex character with many different sides to him. In some ways, I actually think that Spike's attitude tends to rub off on Twilight. Does anybody else notice that in the first season, in the very early episodes, when it's Twilight that has to learn the friendship lessons, is Spike being the voice of reason, yet later down the series, when it's becoming more focused on other characters, it's then Twilight becoming the passive observer, and it's she becoming the voice of reason. Well, once again, I hope you've enjoyed my thoughts and opinions on Spike, but I'm afraid to report there is still one part left. There's still a few little things I'd like to go over with Spike, and to make a proper conclusion. So if you've enjoyed it so far, I hope you'll still stay around and stay tuned for the final installment. Until that time, I am the Peaceful Ponderer. I hope you've enjoyed listening, and I hope to see you next time.